Hey, welcome everyone to our second in a series of Zoom discussions focused on issues that could evolve into bills for the 2023 legislative session. 2 weeks ago, our Zoominar focused on gun violence prevention, and you can view a recording of that discussion by going to retakeourdemocracy.org, clicking on Actions and Events in the top menu bar, and you'll find a link to our Zoominars near the top of that page. Today's topic is modernizing the state legislature, a reform we feel might be the single most important legislation to be introduced in 2023. I'm Paul Gibson, co-founder of Retake Our Democracy, and with me is...
Hi, everybody. I'm Roxanne Barber. I'm the other co-founder of Retake Our Democracy. And I just want to say, if any of you are new to Retake Our Democracy or to our Zoom series, welcome. And if you want to know more about us, if you don't know much about who we are, please go to retakeourdemocracy.org and read about us. And I totally agree that reforming the legislature could be a game changer that could impact all kinds of legislation that we want to get through that we haven't been able to get through. So we're really looking forward to this conversation.
Before we get started, I do want to acknowledge that we're conducting this Zoom on stolen Tewa land, and I want to thank our Tewa neighbors for being such good stewards of the land. And then I was going to just make an announcement. We had planned August 17th? Yeah, August 17th Zoom on Public Bank, and one of the key people involved in that had emergency surgery yesterday, and it's up in the air whether we're going to be able to do it at all. It might be in September. It may be August 7th, but we will keep you posted in our blogs and our alerts about that.
Right. And you can go, if you go to retakeourdemocracy.org and go to Actions and Events, that's where the upcoming Zoominars are posted, and you can register there.
Okay. So modernizing the legislature doesn't mean just sprucing up the roundhouse with a coat of paint. It involves pretty substantial reform of how the legislative process works. And we're lucky to have with us today Representatives Angelica Rubio and Cristina Ortiz, who are involved directly in doing that work, developing that legislation, and Rick Ann Bach, who is an activist with Indivisible Santa Fe. And we also will be having Carol Lynch, who is the co-founder or the founder of Legislative Momentum. And I'm kind of concerned that she's not with us yet, but we will forge on. There's a really strong movement among 10 Democratic legislators, all women, I might add, who have been working together to help develop a package of legislation that we're going to find out about in just a minute. But first, Roxanne's going to run down how this is going to go.
Yeah, and I just want to remind everybody that we are recording this, and the recording will be available if you need to leave early or if you want to let somebody else know about it tomorrow on our website under Actions and Events, and then go to Zoominar series, and it will be available there. So the way this is going to work tonight, for the first hour roughly, we're going to be asking questions to the panelists, and then the last 30 minutes we're going to take questions from all of you, the attendees. So put your questions into the Q&A, please. The chat doesn't seem to be working, but we usually use Q&A for all the questions anyway, so please do that. You might want to wait just a bit until you hear from our panelists, because your question might get answered. Also, I think that's, I wanted to say we had a few other legislators registered for the Zoominar tonight, and so we welcome their questions or comments in the Q&A as well. And if they want to make a comment to the group, we can elevate you and allow you to speak as a panelist. Okay, I'll give it back to Paul.
Okay, let's get started. I always like to let our guests introduce themselves. And so we're going to start with you, Representative Rubio. Can you tell us how you got involved in the legislature and in the modernization of the legislature process? Maybe just the latter part.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Angelica Rubio, and I represent District 35 here in the city of Las Cruces. And I have been serving in the legislature since 27 at the start of 2017. I was elected in 2016. And part of the reason that I'm involved in this process, it's really what I ran on when I first got elected. I felt that this legislature is very we call it that it only really we only have legislators who represent the three R's, which are the resourceful, which is I think me and Representative Ortez, the rich, and the retired. And unfortunately, those are three sectors within, or those are three different types of folks who are representing our legislature right now, who, in my opinion, not everyone has an idea of how the policies that we pass directly impact communities. And so I would like to see more people who are directly impacted by our policies to be able to serve, and they can't do that until we actually have a legislature that that does have a salary, that people can actually afford to do this and represent their constituencies on a day-to-day basis. And so that is the work that I've been doing since I started the legislature, and I'm grateful that there are 9 other women who are working with me on this issue, because I think that in order for us to get this type of legislation passed, we need some really good momentum within our legislature with folks who have a very good relationship with people on the ground, because it's going to take voters to pass legislation, a constitutional amendment. Particularly, we have this issue around salaries has failed 7 different times in the past, and we have every intention of making sure that all the ground is covered before we're able to send this to issue to the voters, because we need voters to vote yes. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today about this issue, and I look forward to talking to you all about that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angelica. Christina?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Paul. My name is Christina Ortez. I am the representative from Taos. You may have seen my daughters walk behind me. I am a single mom. I co-parent with my ex-husband. I have 2 daughters, 11 and 8, and they're enjoying what is left of their summer. I'm serving in what's the end of my first term. I will be going back. Thanks to many of you who supported my campaign. I really appreciate those donations. They made a huge difference. And I apologize if you haven't received your thank you card yet. We have no staff. So which is another point I'd like to bring up when we think about modernization. I'm so glad that Angelica talked about the salary aspect of it. You know, I am a single working mom. I work full time as the executive director of the Taos Land Trust. So, you know, it's really challenging being a public servant and working full time. Though we do receive a per diem when we're serving, either in interims or during the session. You know, we have a lot of time during the year when we're not doing those things. And so, you know, thank your representative and senator who are doing all of this work unpaid. For me, the salary is definitely key, but also, you know, I have grown increasingly concerned by the amount of time that we have to pass good legislation, right? So I want us to be looking at session length and how we introduce legislation, how we only have 60 days and 30 days to make that happen. I think as New Mexicans, we are underserved by this process. You know, given the amounts of money that are in the budget floating around in various departments, we're making decisions very quickly, and I believe that we need to serve our constituents better. One more thing that I think is really important is the fact that we don't have staff outside of the time that we're in session. So I think that's really important as well. Constituents need to be served, and they need to know who they can go to, and they need an answer quickly. And I think if we really looked at the staffing for us as well, that would make a real difference.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And now, Rick Ann, how did you get involved in this?
I got involved with modernizing the legislature as part of Tom Solomon's coalition. It's maybe been a year that I've been attending meetings there, and we started slowly studying the issue, looking at the issue, and little by little, we have added people, and it feels like all of a sudden, things are happening. It feels like a lot more people are interested. We're on the radar. And, maybe this is the year we're going to make it work. I really hope so. And I'll just say, Kara, it seems like she is, I guess she's just getting over COVID. And so she's got a little bit out of the loop. I think maybe the other Rick Ann Bach might be her, but I'm not sure about that. She might need a new link to get in.
Oh.
Somebody there?
Somebody there?
Hi,
there she is. There she
I
is.
am the other Rick and Brock, and I didn't
Yay.
do that. Hi, sorry to join late. I really am just exiting COVID and space this a little bit.
So can you just tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this whole issue?
Well, here I'd like to give props to Representative Rubio. She brought together a group of women legislators who are trying to focus on, actually, they are focusing on modernization as a platform for this upcoming session. And I was fortunate enough to be asked to support this group in various legal and policy research to help better understand what is modernization and what are our options for this upcoming session.
Great. Well, I'm sorry to hear that you've been sick. I'm glad you could join us. And I just changed your name. So you're not Rick Ann Bach 2. You are now yourself. Hope I spelled it right.
Thank you, Roxanne.
Sure. You're welcome. Welcome all of you, and welcome to our attendees as well. Now we're going to ask Rick Ann she has a little slideshow that by way of introduction to this issue, for those of you who don't know that much about it. So Rick Ann, go ahead and share screen and tell us about it. I think so. I think you should be
You're
okay.
muted, Rick Ann.
I need permission to share.
Oh, you do? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Hold on. Mm. Okay.
All right, now you're co-host. You should be able to share.
Look here.
There we go.
This box always gets in the way. Here. There we go. So yes, we are here to talk about modernizing the legislature. And I will just give us some background. I'm going to start at the beginning. I'm sure most of you know that we were admitted as a state in 1912. We were the 47th state admitted. And we seem to be stuck with that number 47. This slide, by the way, is additional information, but it is the original New Mexico flag, as I understand it. We are 50th in education, 49th in child well-being, 49th in opportunity, 45th in infrastructure, 44th in economy, 33rd in healthcare, highest crime rate, highest percent of poverty, lowest income growth. And I'm sure you all know all of that. But the question is, why is that? And what can be done? What can we do about that? Okay, why won't this move? There we go. So on the left-hand side is 1912. On the right-hand side is now. We started with 24 senators. We now have 42. It's almost twice as many. We've more than doubled the number of representatives in the House. Our population is 6 times bigger, more than 6 times bigger than it was in 1910, which was the census. Our operating budget is 38 times bigger than it was. And that's not 1912, that is 1969. Those are the farthest back numbers I could find. So from 1912, woo, can you imagine what that number is? And this last bullet point here is really just, it's a funny for me. The original building cost $140,000 to build in 1912. And it was built by penitentiary people and salvaged materials, prisoners and salvaged materials. And the roundhouse, of course, is much newer and cost almost $5,000. Here we go. So as the representatives pointed out, they get no pay for what they do. It has not changed since the beginning, 1912. The salary, New Mexico has the only state that does not pay their legislators. And I get this information from the National Conference of State Legislators. If you go to that website, you'll see that what states pay their legislators, what they expect of them, what they pay them per diem, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is all over the map. But we are the only state that pays 0 salary to our legislators. New Hampshire is not much better. They pay $100 a year, but our arch rival for the bottom of the heap of everything, Mississippi, pays theirs $23,500. Go figure. Our legislature was set up as a citizen legislature. And the idea behind that was that regular people, citizens just like you and me, would be legislators. But in reality, as the legislators pointed out, and we will continue to point out, it really allows people who can afford to work for free, people who can get the time off, people who are retired, et cetera. It also seems pretty obvious to me that it invites help from outside people who are interested, people who have money and time, i.e. lobbyists, to give their help to our legislators. We also have the shortest sessions, or one of the shortest sessions in the US. As you know, they're alternating 30 and 60-day sessions. And last year and this year, many of us were able to attend legislative sessions via Zoom, most of us, and we learned that making sausage is really messy. It's not a pretty picture. Bills were poorly written, and many good bills sat in committee until the session ran out. And this has to do with the length, partly to do with the length of the session. Our issues today are more complex and many of them more urgent than they were, especially in 1912. If you just look at the governor's main priorities, they include the environment, education, crime and criminal justice. You can't find more complex issues than those, or more urgent issues, truth be told. And we need solutions that are smart, comprehensive, and well thought out for these kinds of problems that we should come together to solve. This takes study, debate, and time. Our legislators do not have dedicated staff. They have no one to help them with constituent services throughout the year unless they are resourceful and find someone, some way to help them. I know my group, Indivisible S, often offers help to legislators to do research or write thank you cards. By the way, we can do that too, and are happy to do it. There's not enough time to thoroughly research complicated issues. The option, again, I'll say it again, to rely on lobbyists for direction is got to be tempting. Yeah, there's, as far as I know, as far as I can tell from research, there are 53 paid staff to serve the entire legislature. Finance committee gets 33, House leadership 10, and Senate gets 10. And just as a comparison, the Capitol buildings and ground staff is 44 people. They have a big responsibility too, but they're not writing laws that affect all of us. So the reason that we think modernizing the legislature can benefit all of New Mexico is the more diverse voices we get in the legislature, the better people are represented, diverse peoples are represented, more responsive constituent services and fewer temptations for ethical problems. A larger, more varied pool of people spending more time solving complex issues, time for additional debate among colleagues. All of this adds up to laws that citizens support and in turn support the entire community, future generations, and the environment. So from my perspective, it is time for a responsive, inclusive, transparent, diverse, equitable, thoughtful, honest, modern legislature now. And I have one more slide that has a list of things that we can do as activists. I don't know if you want me to talk about those now or you want to save that for the end.
You can lay it on us now.
Yeah, go ahead. And we'll
Okay.
we can remind people at the end.
We can go back to it. Okay, so first, my first point of activism on this issue in particular is to follow the lead of the legislators, especially on timing. They know what they're up against in the legislature. This issue's been around for years and years, and we don't want to blow it for them by doing something too soon and ruin their chances of getting this through. But there are things, in my opinion, that we can start now as activists. First is we can contact our representatives and tell them that we support this issue, especially the senators. I think there's a pretty growing number in the House. You legislators will tell me if that's wrong. I think it's the Senate where it's the stickiest point. But if they hear from us, perhaps they'll get on board. We can get fellow activists to help, which we're doing right now. Thank you, Paul and Roxanne, for that. We can support this issue in interim committees. We can, after the election, then we can start writing letters to the editor to start getting the public on board with this. We can support this issue in the legislative session come January. And we can start, I guess, get prepared to do public outreach through 23 or maybe even 24 when this issue would actually come up on the ballot. So that's what I have to say. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you can stop the
there I
screen
am.
sharing. And
There you
Kara,
go.
did you have anything to add to that before we get to the specific questions?
Sure. I'll hopefully this is speaking to the group out there. You know, these three policy priorities will each be addressed in slightly different ways. However, compensation and session length require a constitutional amendment. So those two issues will take 2 years at least. And depending on the strategy that legislators agree upon as a body is best for that body, you know, this could take 4 years or longer, right? If we run session length alongside compensation, that could take 2 years if the citizens out there vote to support this constitutional amendment. If, however, those are staggered, the minimum would be 4 years. And then lastly, I want to say that while our legislators are the only legislators, the only state legislators in the country not to be paid, they're also severely behind the times when it comes to adequate staffing and personal staffing to support what a legislator is required to do for adequate constituent engagement, adequately understanding the implications of policy in the communities. So, you know, along with pay, I really think supporting our legislators in being able to enact legislation that's best for the communities, they need staff to help them understand the complexity of legislation coming before them.
Okay, thank you. So let's hear straight from our legislators now.
So we'd like to get as much as possible, kind of an up close and personal view of being a 21st century legislator in a 20th century legislative process. In other words, what is it like to try and juggle all you juggle? And so I was going to start with first Angelica and ask her about what are some of the things about the way the system works now that most impede your ability to do your job and live a normal life?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I know that it sounds very bleak in terms of being at the bottom of a lot of lists, but I also want to say that those of us who've been serving in the legislature for quite some time, we have actually made a lot of transformational change through policy, despite all of this. And I want to acknowledge that, because I don't think that there's enough of that being done. We see it even. We were talking about an op-ed that was written last week about some of us progressives that we're just too out there. But the bottom line is that us progressives have actually passed some of the most important tax credits for working families and expanded them to a lot of New Mexico families over the course of the last few years. We've expanded tax benefits. We've issued relief payments to essential workers. We passed a paid sick leave bill, one of the strongest in the country. Last year, we have been able to pass policies around predatory lending. We eliminated the extremely high percentage rate on that this last year. We've increased the minimum wage, where surrounding states have been stuck at $7.50. Like, we have done so many we have passed so much transformational pieces of policy, but we've done it at an expense to each of us individually. I mean, I am not going to speak for Representative Ortez, but I can only imagine that if I'm struggling personally within my own life to just gain some balance, because I care so much about my community, like I have a dog. Like, I mean, that's really my responsibility right now, is just taking care of myself and my dog. But there's so many people in our in our legislative community, and many of us are very close, that they've had to forego family responsibilities or other things, because this is just how committed they are to the work. And so I think one of the things that's very important for people to understand is that as we continue to move forward with this issue, and as it gains momentum within our legislature, that it's crucial that you all speak to your neighbors and share with them that we're not just these wealthy people asking for more money. Like, we're just asking for a reasonable compensation to be able to continue the work that we have all been, many of us who have been working have been working on for a very long time. I mean, I serve in the legislature because I want to do transformational work. That is the reason why I ran. I didn't want to. I will tell you, I do not like being in the legislature. I actually, Representative Ortez knows this because I'm very vocal about it. I actually hate being in the legislature because of the politics, because of the how divisive it is. I'm a community organizer. I prefer to be working on the ground with community. But so when I serve in the legislature, I'm going to work to try to pass transformational pieces of policy. And this is why I've joined 9 other women to work on this particular issue, because I know that that's their commitment as well. And so that is why I'm here. That's why we're putting in the work. And that's one of the things that I really encourage many of you all to be our spokespeople out in your communities, to be able to say there are very good legislators trying to get the right things passed, and this is just one of those transformational policies that not only address where we fall nationwide, but also how do we continue to build off of a platform that many of us have been working on for so many years, that we've been successful. Like, we want to do more. There's still so much more to be done.
Thank you for that, Representative Rubio, and thank you for reminding us of all the great legislation that has been passed, particularly in the last few years. Representative Ortez?
Yeah, I just if you guys haven't read that op-ed written by Sandy Jones, you should take a look at it. I don't know if folks can see the chat, but I'll put a link in there. It was extremely offensive. As one of the I had a
Jones,
primary
offensive?
opponent.
Wait, and
What's
what is
that?
it, what is
I
it
said
that you're
San-
referring to?
I said Sandy
There,
Jones, offensive.
there was an op-ed in the Albuquerque Journal last
Oh,
week about how basically progressives are ruining the Democratic Party. And there were lots of things said about people like me. My name was included, though it was misspelled, which really, really pissed me off. But there was sort of a call to action, that we, demand a more moderate Democratic Party, and then listed all the things that moderate Dems stand for, like a good economy, good paying job, outdoor recreational opportunities, a litany of things. And I was like, oh, that's so funny because Rubio uh, actually introduced a bunch of that legislation, which I just found so ironic that it was actually the progressive Dems that made those things happen. So, but I think it's really important to kind of to understand that as we move into this, and why the modernization movement is it's so important to me. Um, I run a conservation group in Taos. I have been working in collaboratives and community organizing for a very, very long time. I didn't really I think I'm not naive about a lot of things, but I think I was naive about the level uh, um, of uh, of I don't know, exhaustion and challenges that I faced, as a first time legislator in during COVID, trying to juggle all of these things. It was difficult for me, and I think it was made more difficult by the fact that I'm organizing my own schedule all the time. So is Representative Rubio. So is everybody else, right? Unless you're in leadership and then you have some support. But what we don't have, and I think it's really detrimental to our communities on a community level, is is sort of that level of trust between a constituent and their leader. If you're on top of it, you can get those questions answered very quickly, and there are lots of people who can help us, in the our house clerk. But we need that accountability. So I think that's what I was drawn to when I think about the modernization. I think about how my daughters, they serve too, right? They do all kinds of stuff that helps state government that nobody really even knows about. Supporting their mom, of course, but they were at um, a revenue stabilization tax policy meeting for like 2 days in the roundhouse, and thank goodness for all the security guards in the roundhouse who fed them and kept them entertained. But they're serving, and I cannot. I need their future to be different from my present right now. So I think that's what really drives me to think about this. And one more quick shout out to the women that are involved in this. I wasn't part of the broadband group of Great Broads for Broadband. I know that's not an official name, but really remarkable women working together to bring affordable broadband to the state, and significant investments in connectivity. The basis of this modernization group is those women, and I am just super honored and grateful to be part of that group.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
And we're going to skip the question about how would support staff help you, Christina, because you just more or less laid that out.
I
And
think it's pretty clear,
we've got a lot of questions.
and we want to make sure.
But then what will my daughters do with their time if I have staff?
Maybe you
I
can
don't know.
hire them.
So not only are you working for free, your whole family's working for free. Okay, so yeah, so Kara, tell us a little bit about legislative momentum and how you're working with legislators on this issue.
Well, as Rep. Ortez suggested, legislative momentum really grew out of the success of the Connect New Mexico Act, where both Beth Bardwell and I supported that group of women in analysis around the Connect New Mexico Act bill. Legislative momentum has grown up in the sense that we have really helped the legislators in their cohesiveness and identifying the values that drive modernization. And this group of women is committed to this issue because it is an equity issue. They firmly believe that representation is core to passing legislation that's for the people, for our communities. And so legislative modernization has developed workshops that support leadership growth and skills. It is a place where the legislators can come together to debate various policy, and where legislators can connect to other state legislators from across the nation. So this effort really is bigger than anything Beth and I have brought to the table, because it's attracted national partnerships and other forms of support that see the value of these women in particular, but women and women of color brought into serving in our legislators across the board.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I was gonna just say, I think this is your question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're not following the exact order. We might need to skip a few things here and there if you're looking at the questions to the rest of our panelists, just because we want to make sure we leave enough time for questions. So can you both Representative Rubio and Representative Ortiz just take a minute or two to tell us, and you've already talked a little bit about this, but what is it like on a daily basis? And I think a lot of people think, oh, you work during the legislative session, and then that's it. And then your work's over. And then you come back, the next January. And a lot of us know that just isn't true. There are interim sessions. There's a lot going on. So can you just explain a little bit about, travel and just all the work that you wind up doing for free? Whoever wants to go first.
Want me to go to first, Rubio?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to give you an example of what it is. Summertime's very different from the session, right? When you're in the session, it's like, all bets are off. You prepare for that session in the fall. You're talking with activists. You're getting your slate of bills that you're going to introduce together. You're making all that happen. And once it starts, you're in your committee meetings, and then you're on the floor, and you're negotiating your bills. And it was really nice to chat with, many of you who I can see, on the attendees list on feedback on and good criticism on some of the bills that I had. So that's just you have to expect that your day is going to not really be your own, that you can't really plan your day because it's so dependent on so many other people and meetings and things like that. But then you get a little bit of a break in between the session and the interims. But in that time, there are people who are calling you all the time that need help. They need, they haven't heard from MVD. They haven't received their tax rebate. Today, I already got like 5 calls today just about things that need to be dealt with. One was like, there's the CID inspector for Taos County, hasn't been able to come up here for like 3 weeks, and there's an elderly woman whose interest rate is going to double unless she gets this inspection done. So like that's a complicated, like, oh gosh, okay, who do I call? Who do I talk to about this? I have to talk to CID. I have to like figure out if I can gently encourage, the gentleman to come up and do this inspection. It's that kind of stuff that I think takes up much more time than you think, right? Over the course of a day. And there are legitimately probably like 15 phone calls that I haven't made yet in the last 2 weeks, because I have spent the last 2 days at Water and Natural Resources learning about our very dire water situation, and making sure that we're, kind of on the right track there with budgeting. One more thing, I'm taking 2 weeks of personal vacation starting on Friday, so that I could attend 4 different conferences. Some of those conferences are covered by, the whoever's arranging it. A few of them are. The rest of them are, I can get some things reimbursed from legislative council services for my participation in those conferences, but otherwise, hotel rooms and food, sometimes even registration, have to come out of my own money. You can use some campaign funds for that. So I think that's really, really important to note as well, that like I'm using my vacation to go to a conference. One conference on modernization, which I'm super excited about. The other ones are, energy and meeting other legislators. It's really important to go to those, right? But like that's my personal vacation. Again, grateful to do it, but it means that I then don't have vacation for like actually vacationing. So that puts a strain on legislators, and I think it's something to keep in mind. So I guess I say that as a, I'm sorry I haven't gotten back to you.
Okay, thank you. Representative Rubio?
Yeah, my days I think are a little bit different in that I rarely get calls from constituents, and for me it's because I feel like there's just a lot of people in our community who don't realize what we can do for them. And I think the questions that I do get are because I'm actually asking questions from community folks in my area. As I said, I'm a community organizer. And so that's really how I have this just a really unique situation in that I understand more or less what's happening in our community, and I happen to also be a legislator. And so those are the ways in which I feel like I'm at service to my community. But part of it is the community outreach that I need to be able to do to inform folks in my community to know that I am here to help you out. And so I know that in the past, especially in the last couple of months, housing has been a big issue that I have been working with constituents on, particularly advocating for them to be able to receive the fundings that they need to be able to keep themselves from getting eviction. We have an incredible housing crisis here in the state of New Mexico that that the pandemic really just really amplified. Like, we were already in a crisis prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic just really exasperated everything and so we have a huge crisis. And so a lot of the conversations that I'm having are not only to address short-term solutions to help people who are facing eviction, but also thinking about long-term strategies for how we really try to solve this problem. And I'm going to be completely frank, I've really taken a step back from a lot of my legislative duties because of this issue. I don't have the mental capacity at times to be able to address everything, because not only am I a legislator, but I also have to pay student loans. Like, I have to pay rent. I am a regular person trying to be we are floating on a rock around the universe and still trying to figure out how to pay our debt. Like, this is how insane things feel right now. And I think many of us are just struggling with that. And to be able to also address it from a legislative standpoint is also very challenging. And so that is one of the things that I pretty much chose to do this year, is that my priorities in the legislature are this issue and housing. And those are the two priorities that I spend most of my time on. And that is something that I had to do in my 6th year in the legislature, because there was just so much output in previous years that I had to finally realize that if I'm not taking care of myself, then I can't take care of my district. And I think that is really at the center of a lot of the work that we're trying to address with this issue, is that we're seeing a lot of legislators, not just here in New Mexico, but across the country, who are getting burnt out, particularly those from my age, who are realizing that the stress is just not worth it. It's not worth trying to address all of these issues when we have other things to address in our own personal lives. And so those, I think, are decisions that legislators are having to make. We saw this past session, many legislators leave. There's quite a few that are not coming back. And I think part of that has a lot to do with this piece around modernization, is that it's just not a sustainable system in our state. And the folks who can and like the idea of a citizen legislature, it's because they can afford to do it, and unlike many of us who are just really trying to make it work.
So I'm going to go a little off script here with this question, because in listening to what you're saying, I'm wondering about how you're going to be able to message this without it sounding wah, wah, wah. And, like, when you go to the voters, and you're going to be saying, we want you to pass this because we need this, and it makes good sense, everything you're saying. But, there are voters out there, and you were saying it's been defeated 7 times. I talk to people who think you guys make all kinds of money. And, it's just like not true. But if you're going to lay out the case, you have to talk about the
challenge.
conditions and the challenges you work under. And how do you do that in a constructive way so that it doesn't sound like, you're just complaining?
So I feel like we're amongst friends here. So that's why if it sounds like we're complaining, it's because I think we're amongst friends. But as we've mentioned, we've been working on this issue for the last year. We have a number of allies and partners that we've been working with, both at the national level and at the state level. Representative Joy Garrett and I commissioned a study that is currently being conducted through the University of New Mexico, where all of the legislators are being surveyed anonymously around their ideas around modernization. And we hope to have that report ready to go before the session starts in January. Part of that effort, part of this effort also includes, we have a really strong communications person that's working with legislators that we will be soon working on op-eds, things like that. And a huge messaging campaign. But more importantly, and the reason that this issue is so important around equity is because there are organizations on the ground who are working with frontline communities all the time, who are partnering with us to also help us to address some of these issues, that it is an equity issue, and that in order for us to be able to turn things around within the state of New Mexico, this is an area that we need to really, we have to pass policies that are going to address this. And so there is a multifaceted campaign structure that is part of this campaign, and I think part of the momentum, and folks have asked about it as well. We don't know what legislators are going to say publicly. I can already tell you that between now and election day, there will be no Republican that's going to come out in favor of any of this. But come January, the tone may be very different. And so it just really is, the timing is really going to be an essential piece around all of this. And that is the roadmap that we are currently working on. We will have a drafted piece of legislation in the coming weeks that we would like to begin to share. We will be presenting at interim committees throughout the fall. And we've already had listening sessions with leadership on this issue. We've had listening sessions with staff and legislative council services within Legislative Finance Council, and a number of other folks who who actually have a say in how we pursue this whole process. So this year, it has been a year of a lot of learning and a lot of understanding that what we have seen happen in the last 7 years, the last 7 times that this issue has been shot down, there has not been ever a coordinated effort in the way that there is right now. And so that is the difference between what we're seeing at this moment versus what has been done the 7 previous times that this issue has been shot down by voters.
I just want to add here, and the work that's happening with the UNM Bieber study, and with the work that Kara is doing, and all of us are a part of, is it's really rooting these campaigns, because it's a multi-pronged campaign to modernize the legislature, right? It's not just salaries, it's not just session length, it's not just additional staff time. It needs to be rooted in data, all of that, because that's how the data gathering and the research on, like, is it a constitutional amendment? Can it be a line item in the budget? Like, how do we make that happen? It's a multi-pronged strategy. And so, as we get closer, and as we develop bills and determine whether or not we could introduce them in 2023 or 2024 or 2025, we're going to be relying on other messengers, not just us. This is a hard job. It's also the coolest, best job I've ever had, but it's no doubt a very, very hard job. But, for me, and I think for the people who are working with us, it's really about, like, how do we increase accountability? How do we build resiliency in our state systems? How do we build responsiveness? Like, we get one shot every year to do a budget, right? And things change, and then we're called back to redo that budget. That's the kind of stuff that, and that will continue to happen. But if we have a more responsive legislature, we can address those things, I think, in a more timely manner. But it's going to take messengers to get that across, that are not just us. And I think that's the role that Retake can play, along with the other folks who've been helping us drive this work.
So, you have talked about staff salaries and legislator salaries and longer session length, but there are other things that Retake has identified. And I'm wondering, things like the filibuster, or hearings starting at 10 o'clock at night and going until 3 in.the.morning, day after day after day. And are any of those going to be issues? Are those issues you're looking at? And, all of those kinds of things would have to be addressed in different ways.
I mean, the thing is that a lot of those issues that you're raising they're all rules. They're rules that have been created by leadership. There has to be a majority of us that can be able to basically say that we don't want that. I know that the Senate, for example, doesn't have a filibuster, or they do have a filibuster, but they don't have debate for 3 hours in the way that we do. They don't. The Senate is different than the House. Each chamber has its own rules, and so that doesn't require us to change anything in statute. And so that is just an internal thing that we have to do. We are in the process of voting in December a new Speaker of the House. This new Speaker of the House will determine what those rules can look like throughout the session come January and February. Those are things that, yes, we can absolutely raise in caucus. But I think one thing that it's just for folks to understand, it's not something that we can do through policy. It's part of the political process. And I just also want to say that this is a very polarizing place to be in the legislature right now. And I don't know if things will change after November, but as of right now, to change rules, you also need minority leadership to agree to that. And that is always very hard to come by. That's where a lot of negotiations have to take place. And a lot of times it's probably not worth changing these rules, because if Democrats, for example, were to ever lose the majority in the House, those rules could be used in ways that are very detrimental to our communities. And so those are a lot of the things that we have to be thinking about. But in terms of how we structure the legislature, I mean, there are a lot of women in the House right now who are talking about what would it look like if we actually had a decent hour to actually debate bills. That why do we have to be debating bills at 3 or 4 in the morning? It doesn't make any sense. There's reasonable people within our chamber who are voicing these concerns. We just have to elect more progressive women. I mean, that's really what we have to continue to do, is because we understand we're the ones that are going to change how the legislature works. in my opinion, it's a very patriarchal system. It's ruled by this idea of like holding power. And I think what we're trying to do is try to change all that. And this fundamentally is these three things that we're looking at, I think will hopefully go a long way to make even deeper changes to even just the structure over time. But it's not something that we can do immediately, but it's definitely something that we're all thinking about.
I just want to add here, Paul and Roxanne, that, you know, what Angelica said is, you know, I think is shared by so many folks, you know, but there are also, like, leadership understands that it's very frustrating for the public to be making comments on, you know, on legislation, in, you know, during committee meetings at 10 p.m. We know that, they know that, and I think that COVID taught everybody a lot about how things could be made different, right? So that we could have more participation, more folks engaging in debate. And so, you know, but the rules, of course, depend on, you know, what is in statute as well. Like, the reason why we meet at 10 p.m. is because we have 3 more days left of the session and we have 30 things that need to happen. Right. That's the thing. And it's just where it is. Right. And so, you know, I think that it's an iterative process, right? The rules affect the statutes, then they affect each other.
Right, right.
Well, the
So-
same thing with you know, going for a longer session. If that doesn't go along with salary, then you're asking people like you to work even longer hours and longer sessions with no pay. So it seems like they're going to have to go together, but that's
Right.
obviously something you'll talk about.
Before we get to the attendees' questions, and I have one more question for Rick Ann and Kara, but one clarification first. So which parts, my understanding is that paying legislators has to be constitutional amendment, so that has to go to the voters. Paid staff does not necessarily, but then longer sessions does. Making longer sessions. Okay, so two out of those 3 have to be amend the Constitution and requires it to go on the ballot. Okay, and it has to be during a general election year. So it would be 24 at the soonest that anything could go to the voters. Is that right? 2024.
And for paid staff, could you do that just in the feed bill?
Yes, and that's one thing that I wanted to just mention to folks is that is something that has been discussed in previous sessions. So the idea of getting a salary, I mean, getting paid staff has already been in discussions with leadership. We just don't have generally the support of the Republicans. And so that could just, because it's in the feed bill, it pays all the other staff that we need during the legislature. And so I don't believe that it's been pushed that much harder just because of the fact that it's just just a very controversial issue. So we're looking at other options. I mean, part of the listening sessions that we've been having in recent weeks is hearing from the chief clerks from the Senate and the House, hearing from Legislative Council Services, hearing from Legislative Finance Council, learning that they actually are able to do more than what many legislators don't realize. And this is part of like the training process, that when we go in for orientations, when we're first elected, many legislators have no idea that of all of the different bodies that exist that can actually support them. So many of us we're thinking about ways in which can we elevate their efforts and continue their support while still getting the supports that we need back in our own constituencies.
Okay, great. So one more question for Rick Ann and Kara before we get to the Q&A, because I just want to make sure this gets out there to people. And that is, what can other advocates do to help this process for you know, like now? I mean, obviously, once there's legislation introduced, they can support that legislation and show up to hearings and that sort of thing. But is there anything that people can do between now and then?
I think right now in the short term, I would encourage you to contact your state legislator and have them do the survey for the Bieber study. UNM is currently conducting that study. There's a number of questions that are being asked by legislators. It would be very important for everyone on this call tonight to contact your legislator and encourage them, in fact, demand that they do the survey, because the survey is going to provide a lot of information to the university to provide the reporting that's going to really be supplemental to our legislation once we introduce that in January.
And what are they telling them? Then please complete the Bieber survey?
Yes, so there's Representative Joy Garrett and I commissioned a study through the University of New Mexico to conduct a study with each of the legislators, with the staff that work at the legislature, and former staff or former legislators as well. That would be one of many asks that I would ask, but that I would suggest that you all contact your state legislator and just ask them if they've yet done the study for UNM on modernization of the legislature.
Okay, great. And Rick-Ann, do you have any other suggestions for what people can do?
Well, I heard something that sounded like something to do to me, and that is writing some letters to the editor now in support of what these women have already managed to pass. All of these tax credits, benefits, relief, sick leave, predatory. I mean, that's only going to help them get through the election, right? But it's also going to start people thinking about all the good that they can do if they actually have the time to do it, right? It doesn't have to, we wouldn't have to right now say anything about modernizing the legislature, just what they've managed to accomplish to date. I think that would be important.
That's a good idea. Do you have anything to add to that, Carol?
You know, I think this is a topic of conversation for the dinner table. And so have the conversations with your family members, have the conversations with your neighbors, ask them, do they know how much a legislator makes in New Mexico? And I think folks will be shocked. And they can also, share the information that the facts that Rick-Ann shared with us tonight about the status of our legislature. So again, I think it's a very simple conversation. The policy we're working on is really complex. It gets complex, but to just have the conversation with your family and friends is one way to push this effort forward.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we're going to go to the Q&A now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the earliest questions, but if I feel that the question's already been answered, I'm probably going to skip over it because we have about 30 questions in here, maybe a little less than that, because some of them were just comments. I think we've kind of covered this, but I'll go ahead and ask it. It's from Pamela Rogers, and she's saying, how much energy is there in the legislature for modernization, and how much public support, as far as you know right now? And just whoever wants
I think there's I think on the House side, there's a pretty good amount of energy to move this forward. There are folks that really want to work on this. I don't have a sense of how my Republican colleagues feel about it. I had a chat with one of them on a river a couple of weeks ago, and he's like, I don't know, I'm not opposed to like staff and longer session length. I'm just not sure. I'm of two minds on the salary issue. So, but the fact that I was able to have a conversation that was pretty calm about this, and like I just want to hear what your thoughts are. I think that made a difference. I think it's really important to have those conversations with the rest of our colleagues. But I don't have a sense what it looks like on the Senate side, really at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is support on the House. I mean, every year there has been a bill that's been introduced around this issue. And so I know that in the last couple of years it's cleared the House, but once it gets to the Senate, it doesn't really get a hearing. And part of that is just the politics in the Senate side. We have had conversations with the Senate Pro Tem, and she is absolutely in support of this issue and has committed to supporting the work that we have moving forward. And so my hope is that come January, that will be in a good position for that. In terms of Republicans, I mean, honestly, it just really depends on what happens with the elections in November. I think the fact that next year isn't an election year, people might feel more confident, more comfortable saying yes to this. But honestly, I can't, if you follow the legislature, you will know that most of the bills that leave the floor, it's always any bill that could create some sort of controversy. I mean, it's always, we only pass it because we have every Dem vote for it. I mean, it's very rare for a Republican to support any Democratic policies, even if they're good policies. So part of it is
predatory
just
lending. Predatory lending had a lot of Republicans on it.
Yeah, so it just really just depends. And part of it is just I mean, I know that I have had conversations with people who do want to have a paid salary. I don't know if they come out publicly and say that, but they do support it privately. There's some folks, Republicans, who just, they like the idea of a citizen legislature. They think it's symbolically, it's a nice thing to have. And but they also come from places, I mean, they're wealthy. And so that's just a different story.
Well, and you can have a citizen legislature and pay them, right? I mean, just because they're paid doesn't mean they're not going to be citizens that represent the whole state, I would assume.
They're even more likely to.
Yeah. So here's a comment / question from Susan Gorman. She's asking about are you going to create, or can you please create a fact sheet for us to use when talking to friends and neighbors? Does anything like that exist? And where can people get it? And if not, when can they get it?
I want Kara to address this for sure, but I think what's really important, I mean, we're creating those things. We're still doing, we're waiting for the Bieber study to come out, which I think is going to have, play a role in how we talk about this going forward. I think it's really important to recognize how much we need a coordinated campaign around it, and those things. We have a comms person that Angelica mentioned, and those things are kind of in development right now. But Kara or Rubio.
Yeah, I mean, we will have a fact sheet. I mean, I think or maybe not just not a fact sheet, but I mean, there will be toolkits out there that you all will be able to acquire within the next couple months. Like, as I mentioned, in the next couple weeks, we're going to begin drafting the piece of legislation that we will start to really showcase in a couple of the interims. We plan to present at Courts, Corrections, and Justice, where there's a lot of interest in that interim committee, as well as Legislative Finance Committee, which is the committee that will determine whether or not pieces of this actually get on the budget. And so that legislation will be drafted in preparation for all of that. And there are a number of organizations, both with folks like Tom Solomon's group, as well as folks who are doing a lot of power building work around the state, who are working on this issue from a place of equity, that they will all be part of this coordinated campaign that will be able to share all of this. But I think Kara brought up a really good point. There are friends of mine who had no idea up until this year that I don't get paid for this work, like close friends. And so these are the conversations that you need to just begin to have. You don't need stats, you don't need numbers, you don't need anything like that at the moment, because what you need to just be able to do is to talk to your neighbors, your family, and say, our legislature doesn't get paid. Did you know that? And just really have a deep conversation about what the consequences are of not having a paid legislature.
Okay, great. Let me see. Tim Peterson, could the legislature pass a bill that allows people to be hired as civil servants to support legislators? That would be a
I-
first step and reduce the load.
Can I just field this? So it already exists that as a citizen can volunteer with and for their representative or their senator in almost any capacity, even providing that research support. It becomes different when a citizen works for an organization lobbying for the passage of certain bills. So if you're an independent citizen and you have the time and the ability to support your legislator, reach out and do that. They would jump at any volunteer support that you can provide.
Okay, great. Thank you. So William Orr is asking, what would be the recurring cost to the budget? And could that cost possibly be a talking point for people who are opposed to this?
Can I do? Oh,
Go ahead.
okay, so I mean, we've done so much research and development of budgets to support paying legislators and to bring staff on board. You know, just this really isn't a big government issue or a make government bigger issue. Paying our legislators will represent less than 1% of the overall state budget. And bringing on staff is, you know, 4 million a year. It's just, when you look at those figures compared to the overall state budget, they're not that much. And the cost of not adopting these measures is so dramatic on our communities.
Okay. Let me see. This is Hiranya Roy Chaudhuri. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. The question is, okay, this is not whining. I think this is referring back to when, when Paul was addressing you, Representative Rubio. This is presenting a dire situation where legislators are having to choose between family and work. We understand that. Yeah. So how do we attract the best and brightest among real people? Well, I'm guessing paying them could be a big part of that. A lot more people would be able to afford to do this if they were paid.
Yeah, right. You know, I mean, I think paying also, but really being very honest with ourselves about the session length as well and what we can and cannot do in this very short amount of time. You know, I think we really have to talk about it a lot, because it makes a difference too. I don't want to have another 90 days and have those days be, you know, the 16 to 20 hour days. You know, we're making decisions without being, you know, in the healthiest of environments, right? We're making decisions very late. You know, we're having debates at 3 a.m. You know, there were 2 all-nighters. Like, and I'm not complaining, Paul. I want to be clear. But what I'm saying, you don't deserve that. We should not be making critical decisions at 5 in the morning. You know, we just shouldn't. You know, we should be, you know, having longer days in the beginning, or, you know, really, or maybe we limit debate in a different way. I don't know. We have to look at a bunch of different options. But, you know, I voted on a bill at like 5 a.m. and that's just dumb. So we have to look at that as well.
Yeah, after being up all night. Yeah, I can't even imagine.
Two times in the 30-day session, we pulled all-nighters.
And I was watching one Senate hearing where a senator came in, he had been presenting a bill, his bill in another committee, and he just walked in and he goes, "What are we voting on and how should I vote?" to his colleague. He didn't even know what the bill was. And, you know, that's just a crazy system. These are important decisions, like you say.
Yeah, and just to
It is.
to be clear, we don't think you're whining or complaining at all. I think
I mean, a little bit. We're, it's okay. I just want to tell you, I did not find out that there was a shower in the building until the last day when I presented to the governor that the session was over. I hadn't showered in like 36, maybe 45 hours at that point. And so I'm not sure why Rubio didn't tell me that there was a shower, but I mean, yeah, it was bad. It was
It's
really
part of
bad.
your initiation, Christina. It was
Is
your
it?
first term. Yeah. Nobody told you that.
Whew,
They-
it was rough.
after 48 hours, though, I can understand why they might have been bringing it up to you.
Mm.
I'm teasing. Yeah, but I think what Paul was saying is just he was for people who might oppose this and then they listen to they think, oh, you're just whining, kind of thing. I mean, but we know you're not. And this is like an
Kara's working on those.
impossible job for no money. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. Okay, so let's see. We have a few more questions. Some of these have been answered. How we can help. We already talked about that. Somebody said door knockers. Right. And I guess that's going to be next year or the following year when you do a big public education campaign. Maybe people will be knocking on doors. Let me see. Pamela Rogers is asking, is there a role that ethics rules can be used to protect legislators from relying too much on lobbyists and leverage modernization? Does that make sense? I think she's asking about, right now you have to rely on lobbyists.
I think the other thing she might be referring to is the fact that there are legislators who are either married or in relationships with lobbyists, and then they vote on bills, or they work in the industry that they're voting on those bills. And is there a way to create kind of a rule? Again, this would probably be a rule that you can't vote on a bill in which either you or a partner have a vested interest.
Yeah. I want to add, just say real quickly, I want to just do a shout out to Senator Feldman, who made a comment. She has really been a trailblazer in addressing a lot of these issues around what we're discussing tonight and the issue around ethics. And I think that's a very important, I just wanted to make sure that I said that, because this is an issue that many of us have been very concerned with. When I first got elected and I went to my orientation, I remember hearing from folks saying that if I had any further questions and that nobody else could answer it, I should just talk to a lobbyist. And these are the sort of things that we hear because it's just embedded so heavily into our legislature that nobody really bats an eye at it. And so we are definitely working to try to figure out how to draft up the legislation. I know that in the past, when we've talked about this issue, we've wanted to, maybe there's folks who would like the Ethics Commission to be involved in this process. Some folks have some hesitation over things like that because they would prefer that the legislature have a direct, that we have direct impact on this policy. So those are the sort of things that we're sort of negotiating within ourselves right now to figure out what would be the best moving forward and how to, in order to get this legislation passed.
But I just want real quick, it's not just about lobbyists influencing legislation as well. I mean, that of course that's what they do. That's their job. But the role of lobbyists in our legislature is complex and complicated. I was just asked by some legislators to call a bunch of lobbyists to arrange for lunch for an interim meeting here in Taos. I'm like, I'm not on that committee. Just because it's my district, I'm going to call people to like pay for the lunch of legislators that, I mean, really that should be part of a budget for the state, that you pay the legislators and the people who are, making presentations, that you give them lunch. Like, that's nuts. It's nuts. But I'm also grateful for the people who have stepped up to pay for lunches, but come on, man, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's crazy. Okay, so this is from Anonymous. So when you're going back to that Beaver survey, if they contact their legislator and they say they don't know anything about it, is there a way, everybody should have received this information, right? Every legislator should know about this survey.
Yeah,
Right.
every legislator should be receiving a notification about it. We know that the Speaker of the House and I don't know yet about the Senate. Kara, you might want to confirm, but I know that the Speaker was going to also help us in making sure that legislators completed the survey. I just don't know what the process will be on the Senate side, but yeah, it's a very simple Google form that legislators will just have to fill out. And so, yeah, that would be my only recommendation is
So if they say they haven't seen it yet, then it will be coming. Or
Mhm.
you don't know if it's already been sent
No,
out
it
to
has
everybody.
been.
It has been?
Yeah. Well, we
Okay,
can talk to Senator Worth because he's our legislator.
well, okay, so in answer to that question, just tell your senator or your House member that to look for that notification, they've received the survey, and to please find it and fill it out. Okay, somebody's asking about talking points. We covered that. Oh, somebody's asking about their senator, Senator Burt. I don't know if you know, I think you both said you don't know what's going on in the Senate and whether people are supporting it or not. And I would just say to Joanne, then maybe write to your senator and ask if, I don't, is that Burt, is that a
He's a Republican.
male or female?
Yeah.
Male, and ask him to support it, So, okay.
And just really quick, it's still unclear how, I know that other legislators have introduced legislation. It's unclear whether or not they will reintroduce legislation as well. So this is why we're kind of just asking that you wait until we have a draft of the bill, because we don't want to also confuse legislators on which bill to support. And so I think I just want to just pump the brakes a little bit on that if you're going to be reaching out to your legislator, it would be best to just be very general in terms of if they support legislative compensation. I think just to keep it as general as possible until we have legislation ready that you start directing those questions to.
I think that's really important because we could mess things up for you.
Yeah. Okay, some of these questions are kind of long, so I'm trying to go through these and figure out. So this is from an anonymous person. Many of us spend a lot of time developing political wins for specific candidates and are both happy and exhausted, only to find that we cannot sustain those victories. Can you reframe how this will promote longer term wins for New Mexicans who want to trust in their vote? So do you see a connection there?
I mean, the way that I look at it is that and this goes back to a brief discussion that we had earlier around some of the things that have been said about many of us progressive legislators, is that our legislature needs to change. I feel that there's still reminiscences of this patronismo that has existed within our legislature for a very, very long time. Like I mentioned, it's a very patriarchal system, and the reason that we've been able to pass very transformative pieces of legislation is because of the mostly progressive women who have been elected in the House and recently in the Senate. And so I think part of what is so exhausting about elections, because I find them exhausting myself, is that we work so hard to elect a certain person, and then sometimes they switch on us and they vote against some of our most important values. And so for me, I feel like if we're able to modernize our legislature, where we incorporate compensation, where we incorporate this new idea of how we meet in the legislature, it will allow for a greater expansive group of people who normally wouldn't choose to step up and run for these seats, that perhaps this would be an opportunity for them to do that. There are far more better and more qualified people to run and serve in District 35 than I am. And I can tell you that because there's very, very good people in my district who could do this job far better than I could, but they can't afford to do so. And so this is an effort to really build on this equity issue, to get folks to realize that if we can pass legislation that's centered on our values of really getting good progressives elected, but that's really my intention, is to make sure that people who are rooted in their community get to have a voice.
Thank you. We're almost out of time, but I'll just ask, Kathy Wooten's asking if she can get a copy of the PowerPoint. So Rick-Ann, maybe if you would be willing to send it to us, we can post it on our website and make it available to people. Okay, great. And then
Happy to.
Okay, thank you. And then a couple people have asked it about the Democratic Party in New Mexico, whether this is something they can, promote or support in an open way.
Do you know if it's in the platform?
We don't know.
We don't know.
I don't know. It probably should be.
Well, we know the chair of the Spark, so.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
We should check that. We can look in there and see if that's in there. I would be surprised if it's not, or at least something related to that.
So does Representative Ortez,
Yeah.
Jay Levine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll chat with
So,
Jay.
the rest of them just look like comments and rather than questions. And so it's 7:30 and we want to respect everyone's time. So I think we're going to close now, and thank you so much to all of you, Representative Rubio, Representative Ortez, to Rick-Ann, to Kara. Thank you so much for being here. I think we all still have a lot to learn about this. And so what we heard from you tonight is that you will pass on information, talking points, those kinds of things, or we'll notify and we can get them out to people. And when the legislation is drafted, is that possible to get to people as well, or is that only available once it's introduced?
I mean, I would say that we will probably more than likely be doing a lot of these between now and the end of the year. So what I would say is to just keep an eye out, and the legislature doesn't necessarily formally post legislation online. So until the legislative session. So I would just say stay tuned, and me and Representative Ortez and many others of the group will constantly be participating in a number of these forums between now and the end of the year.
And that was another suggestion. A couple people were saying, yeah, we need to do more of these, and different organizations will be doing these kinds of things and educating people. So yeah, look for more of that.
And there are a lot of us, and there are a lot of folks who want to make this happen. So I think, again, a coordinated campaign, strategic, focused in very specific House and Senate districts as needed. This is a campaign, and we're going to need everybody involved.
It's going to take some time.
Yeah,
Right.
it will.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Everyone who's
Thank
attending.
you. Thank you
tonight.
all.
Thank you so
All right.
much.
Good night.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.